Harrison here, Pioneer Football League Championship Edition. Instead of a full-fledged Pioneer Sports Center, because we already had our championship highlights from the past 6 years, going into year 7, we wanted to give you a quick show on top 5 championship teams in Pioneer history. Let the debate begin. Pioneer Sports Center coming up now.
Light it up, light it up, light it up, light it up. Turn up. We set the tone. Yeah. Team deeper than the baritone. Like we split the group up, how we breaking bone. Better man up or get carried home. Then we carried on with the program. If my brother's going, then I'm going, fam. Don't make promises, I want the promised land. Couldn't pass you the touch, you might burn a hand. Gotta earn it, fam. I ain't come to be friendly, demand respect. Ain't gon' give it up easy off with your head. I deserve everything I'm about to get. Leave it all on the field, don't have nothing left. Think the boy is a bluff, put me to the test. That's on God, I'm official, don't need a ref. Get your weight up, little homie, you need some reps. Meet you up on the 50, you know the rest.
Yes, indeed. So tomorrow the Pioneer 7th annual championship game will be played, 10U, 12U, and 14U divisions. We have had an absolute awesome time here in year 7. And we just wanted to take a look back, as we did in last week's Sports Center, to recognize some of the top teams in Pioneer history and to rank what would be our top 5 in PFL history. Let's go to our list, shall we? Now, also, eligibility for the list. We have some teams that competed as affiliates, so we're going to throw them in the mix as well. So as eligibility, we're going to put Fordham in there. Fordham's a Pioneer team, and Fordham beat Elizabeth City State in that 2017 team, went really far, actually Patriot League champions or whatever. We'll throw that in there. Columbia will throw in there. We'll even throw the Lehman championship teams in there for contention. I'm including Truman. I'm including those Kennedy squads as well. Who else are we including? We're including our minor league squads. So if New York Bandit teams as their Pioneer affiliates, the New York Patriots, the Bronx Colts, the Brooklyn Pharaohs, also Pioneer affiliate, the Brooklyn Bobcats. All of those teams are in the mix for the top 5 Pioneer teams of all times, championship teams. So if you didn't win the championship, we're going to leave you off the list. If you weren't impressive and had a solid schedule, we're going to leave you off the list. So Fordham, Elizabeth City State, it's just not really that much competition. Columbia, doing a great job, still haven't won the Ivy League crown, although I know Coach Al is going to get those guys there. New York Bandits, storied program, bunch of championships, but that was before Pioneer League and Pioneer League affiliations, so those teams, although we do hail those championship teams and polish those rings, not going to make the list this time. New York Patriots haven't won a championship yet. One of the goals in terms of the to-do list. And Brooklyn Pharaohs, 2-time TFL champs. Ooh, this is going to be pretty tough. Let's check out who made the list. Now, before we get started, I want to give some honorable mentions to some teams that didn't quite make the list and give you a brief reason why. Now, if you don't agree with the list, it's absolutely fine. What we'd like you to do is want to hear the comments, want to hear some of the feedback, but don't be negative, especially if you were on the team, which is a little bit of a bias. We want to know which team you think should be on your top 5 list. Now, it'll be less impressive if you were actually on the team, whether it's coaching or playing or what have you. So give somebody else their due. But if you do feel as though your team should have been on it, please just be positive about your team. Don't be negative about the guys that made it. So there's a few teams that were definitely some of our favorite teams in Pioneer history. However, we're not going to put it in our top 5 greatest for a few reasons. So, for example, the first championship team in the collegiate division was the Brooklyn Rough Riders. Great football team. However, going through the season, and they were, one season, and the first season being the most important, they won the championship game by not a narrow margin, but a narrow margin, and we had one of our PFL Hall of Famers kind of just take over that game. So they played really well at the right time, but you can't really say that team was dominant over the course of that season altogether. So they didn't make the list. St. Albans Trojans, another team that was a dominant team, but a very impressive team too. However, when it comes to their schedule, you could debate that their schedule wasn't as tough as some of the teams that made the list. The St. Albans Trojans were on the board before we really started to expand and play some really top-notch competition, even our travel games within season, what have you. But the Trojans were a very good team, even down to their uniforms and their outfits, some of the best in PFL history, with their sunshine bowl patch and everything like that. Love that team. Great team that was. The Bronx Buccaneers championship team on the high school level was a very fun team. It was an underdog team. So similar to the New York Giants, David Tyree team with Eli Manning and what have you. Not one of the greatest teams of all time. However, one of the funnest teams of all time, one of the great stories in PFL history, one of our favorite stories in PFL history. But if you're upsetting teams, you're not dominant. So, Buccaneers didn't make the list. A couple other teams, the Green Wave. Green Wave had a dominant regular season, however, got knocked out of the playoffs in round one. Can't make the list. Similar to what we talked about the greatest teams of all time, that Patriots team that ran the table and then got upset by the Giants and ended up 17-1. You're not going to put them at the top of NFL history because they lost in the big game when it mattered. So that's kind of that. So let's check out who made the list. Bronx Colts Year 1 team, 14U, was an absolute great squad. Those guys ran up and down the field. They had athletes, linemen, they had size. They went through the season and did a championship run that was absolutely awesome. Great football team. And in year one, we had some tough competition coming from the Nifty Lions, Steelers. So it was like our original teams or what have you, had to put them on the list. Bronx Colts 14U in year one. That was a team that went to the championship and won the championship in year one at their home field over at McCombs Dam Park. Again, great team. Number 4, Silk City Elite, last year's 14U champion. That team, wow. The 14U team would destroy teams, and they had the hardest schedule that we have seen in the Pioneer Football League. In season, they traveled to Philadelphia, they traveled to Baltimore. They had the heavy hitters. The Delaware teams came up to see them. From week to week, they beat a very good they beat the Buccaneers. They beat the Jets. They were beating everybody. Undefeated champions, went down to Florida, won some games in Florida, nationally ranked team, had to put them on the list and had to put them up high. So this is where you start to go, oh, there's a little bit of debate here. So how does a national contending team not get the number 1 spot? Good question. Going in at number 3, Long Island Spartans, 2015 team. This is the team that, and the funny thing is we have 3 teams to pick from because the 10U, the 12U, and the 14U all went to the championship and won the championship. We're going to pick that 14U team that had Gerald Filardi Jr., who is inevitably going to be a Pioneer League Hall of Famer because he was absolutely dominant going all the way through. Had a stable of running backs, could throw the ball, run the ball, most complete team that we've seen in Pioneer Football League history when it comes to weapons on offense and a shutdown defense. Went through the season just beating everybody and beat everybody by a very healthy margin. And although Coach Filardi kind of put the brakes on his machine a couple of times in some of those contests, that team was such a very competitive team, ended up with a very competitive schedule, did some out-of-league travel and beat some really quality teams off the schedule as well, off the league schedule, I should say. So that's number 3. Number 2, Harlem Jets, senior division teams. Now, which team, because there's a bunch of them, the senior level championship game you can't recognize without a Harlem Jet team being on there. So even in the Harlem Jets, the first thing that they're going to say, and I can hear it now, is how are we number two? We're always number one, so how are we number two? The second thing they're going to say is, well, which team is it? Because if you were an alumni of the 2012 team versus the 2013 team, the 2013 is one that got upset. So 2015 they came back. Sorry, 2014 was when the Buccaneers upset the Jets, and then coming back 2015 out in Coney Island is when the Jets got their revenge on the Buccaneers. Having to face the Buccaneers, coming off of the loss the previous year, you see kind of like the mettle of the champion when they go through a little bit of a hard time from the previous year. But that team was an absolutely awesome team. But really, anybody from that Harlem Jets organization on the 18U division from those championship teams could be in any of those slots. So that's the number 2 championship team in Pioneer history. Which brings us to number 1. And I know laying on the beach somewhere is Coach Black and Coach Chuck, and they're saying, come on, Patterson, go ahead. I try to find any reason to make it more competitive than what it is, but when you win winter championships and fall championships and spring championships, keep in mind that the Bronx Colts are 5-time champions. 3 times in the Pioneer Football League with spring and fall championships. And then as a Pioneer League affiliate, they went ahead and won the Triborough Football League and took home this trophy twice. So, impossible to keep them off the list. That's our number 1 team. From top to bottom, secondary was scoring at a rate that was outscoring teams' offenses. Defensive line, offensive line had veterans that could move really well with their feet, getting in position, running absolute clinics. Very tough schedule when it comes to the transitioning from the 18U division to the 21U division to the semi-pro or minor league division. From top to bottom, great class act organization. Which team out of the 5? Well, you'd have to choose the team that won the back-to-back TFL and PFL championship teams, which were basically the same team. But they literally, in the span of a little over 365 days, they won 3 championships. The actual numbers on that, absolutely absolutely impressive. So the number 1 team in Pioneer championship history was the Bronx Colts collegiate level team. So thank you for having some fun with us today. We appreciate your support for the last 7 years of Pioneer football. Please enjoy the games tomorrow, and let's crown some more champions of the Pioneer Football League.